because our mission is all about lifelong learning and books, we're able to bring in really sharp people who also love lifelong learning and books. If you had to pick a team member to hire and one was a big reader and one wasn't, I would hire the person who was a big reader every time. I think they're going to learn faster. They're going to be thinking more critically.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Welcome to the Small Business Mentor podcast, where we shine a light on the black holes of business growth with your host, Alan Pence. In each episode, we explore the leaps and bounds entrepreneurs make as they push their businesses beyond the 1 million mark into the realm of professional sustainable growth. Stay with us as we navigate the journey from brute force to finesse.
Today, we're privileged to have Zach Rubin. He's got a unique kind of business. We've had a couple of unique ones here recently. So he runs the Professional Book Club Guru, along with some other associated businesses. So we're going to kind of get into that and figure out what he's up to. So welcome, Zach. Great to have you on the podcast.
Thanks so much, Alan. Glad to be here.
Cool. So, all right. Professional Book Club Guru. Tell us what this is and how you make money.
Yeah. So, Alan, we manage book club programs for large organizations. So alumni associations, professional societies, companies, public libraries, anyone that has, hundreds or thousands of people that they want to engage around a literary. So everything we do with the book clubs is based around an online kind of discussion community. So it scales and people can participate from anywhere in the world. And how we make money, we charge most of our programs, if not all of them, are free for the participants. And the organization, again, the library, the company, the alumni association, they pay an annual fee for us to manage the program.
So it's kind of like a benefit to some kind of community groups to bind them together and give them something to do.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, especially since COVID, companies and people are more remote and they're not in the office as much. Companies are looking for ways to engage people across offices and across times and locations. And then, alumni associations have always wanted to connect alumni together across kind of time and space. So different groups read different books, have different kinds of conversations, depending on if the goal is professional development or just connecting people together around popular book club, more general reads, Reese Witherspoon book club type books.
And so all right, so say I'm a company, I want to do professional development. Give me an example of what you guys would do.
We'd have a conversation, you'd say, I have these employees, or I want all of my company connecting together. Some companies we work with, we're just working with the young professionals, or we're just working with the managers, reading different books connects to management or leadership or whatever it may be. And then we run an online forum. And every week we're posting new discussion questions, letting participants vote for what the next book is going to be. And we have a team of book club managers, book club facilitators who actually run the program. These programs take a lot of human time, I guess, is what is to make them successful. So creating interesting content, asking the right questions, replying to people's posts and comments, asking follow-up questions, helping community leaders, so discussion leaders who are employees or library patrons or whoever, encouraging them to engage. You could just put it all out there and you wouldn't have much of a community. It takes facilitation to really make it successful.
And so do you guys have a technology platform as well that you're doing that community engagement through?
We do. A lot of what I'd say are interesting technology is actually kind of in the back end that makes it efficient for our people to manage so many book clubs at scale. What's front-facing for a participant is a very slick-looking forum. There's many forum tools out there. It's not anything so complicated that we've necessarily built, but a lot of our back-end tools to actually make it efficient to run many book clubs and make it cost-effective for us to deliver the service is where a lot of our back-end technology focuses.
So are people having so you're posting questions, people are interacting, and then are you holding book club meetings where they come and talk about it and facilitating that kind of thing, or is that done by the company itself?
Yeah. So our programs, we have some, I'd say, almost out of the box programs. If you're an alumni association, your main goal is to engage alumni around interesting books. That's very, very out of the box sort of program. Some companies we work with don't even have a book club. They have a one book program. So that's the whole company comes together once a year, reads and discusses one, leadership book or an interesting novel or something like that connected to some corporate goals. So it's not even really a book club. It's more of a single reading experience. It's very specific to what the organization wants and needs.
I think it would be really interesting in the, like if you have a leadership team or like a organization, we're constantly trying to develop our project managers, to the next level because we run a project-based business and they're sort of the core middle managers. So it'd be an interesting like engagement because the company and platform to recognize them as like this group and then, do some education and help them like upskill, right? Pretty interesting concept. So then do you guys have any stats on like what it does like for engagement or I guess it depends on the organization, like what they're after?
So, and again, right, it very much depends on what they're after. So like a public library is purely looking at engagement, right? They want patrons in the community to be reading books, discussing them together. So they're purely looking at how many people signed up, how often are they logging in, how often are they posting. We do feedback surveys for participants. So things like that. Where some companies will tell us that their, employee engagement survey, like feelings of community and engagement have increased by 12% since last year. And, one of the things people cited was like the book club, but that's not usually if a company's bringing us on with that as a goal, they're doing many things. So I want to take credit for all of that, but it's probably a factor, a piece of many things. So, alumni associations tend to be seeking engaged alumni to ultimately give back either time, talent, or treasure to the university or the high school. So they generally are looking at moving people up the engagement ladder. So if someone had never been engaged before and then they engage in the book club, do they come back to campus for homecoming this year? We do see that effect with many of the schools we work with.
And then how do you guys charge? Like, is it a participant kind of model or how do you do that?
Yeah. So, we always want as many people participating as possible in a program. So we charge based on the reach of the organization. So a company with 1,000 employees pays less than a company with 50,000 employees. But in some cases, we have companies with, 50,000 employees that have fewer participants than a company with 1,000 employees. Because if the CEO says every single person is going to participate and read every one of these books, and that's part of our culture, you could have all 1,000 of those people in the company engaging, maybe some begrudgingly, but a big company that makes it purely like an optional, this is one of many training and development programs, they might only have 500 or 600 people, which isn't bad, right? It's just a different percentage of the community participating, let's say.
Is it all right to ask pricing? Like what do the engagements run from? Like kind of get an idea?
Yeah, so it really depends on the organization size. So anything from a few $1,000s a year for a small community into the tens of thousands for larger communities. We also do book fulfillment. That's mainly for companies. Again, depending on that's very much like how many people are there and how many books need to be purchased. So that can certainly add a lot to the cost of the program. Many companies, though, again, it's one of many professional development opportunities, and they're not necessarily buying, every book for every team member in the company, every reading period.
How have you grown this thing? Give us an idea of like employees, revenue, or anything like that you're willing to share.
We're either just hit 30 employees or just are about to, which is great. My two co-founders and I started this, just the three of us. Having kind of this many people on board is kind of wild.
About $6 million in revenue, am I right?
No, less than that. We're trending that way.
So like in the low millions or something like that?
Yeah.
Okay. And then, so 30 employees, low millions. And then like, what's the growth trajectory of this thing?
Our book club business, it really exploded during COVID. Surprisingly, people wanted a lot of engagement opportunities. And then we're continuing to see growth, especially companies are looking for more ways basically to build their company culture when people don't want to come back into the office. And when a lot of like whatever the company culture was built around coming into the office. And that's just been, a challenge to get people back that way. So this has been a lot of companies are very interested in it from that perspective. But actually where we're seeing the most growth is some of our newer programs, which are all around author talk series. So we run an author talk series for public libraries. And more recently, we've launched one for schools. So elementary schools, middle schools, high schools. Those have actually grown even larger than our core book club business just in the last few years.
And that's a virtual talk that you're doing with them?
They are. We have best-selling authors, again, either children's book authors or adult authors, depending if it's for public libraries or schools, and give talks. We have a host and they're virtual, so patrons or students from all around the country can tune into those. And these are, extremely well-known authors, super New York Times best-selling authors that, most schools and public libraries wouldn't be able to afford to bring them in. But by kind of pooling everyone's resources, we're able to offer a lot of amazing speakers throughout the year.
So how does that work then? I mean, I can imagine libraries are like a terrible procurement process, right? I'm being a government contractor myself. Like, are you able to execute? So you're basically, they're almost like group purchasing in a way. You're like providing an author access to multiple library systems.
It's not a la carte. If you don't want to share a particular author because it's, the day is bad or whatever the reason might be, that's completely fine. You're not picking, I want these 3 authors and not these 12. You get the 20 authors a year. And so the procurement, I mean, there's definitely steps, but, school districts and public libraries, they buy things, right? They need curriculums, they need services, they need resources for their students and their patrons. So there's a process. Alan, I know you do like a lot of the federal contracting stuff. It's not nearly as intensive as that, thankfully.
That's good. And you're coming in at a lower price point, obviously, too. So that part of the business is growing faster than the corporate side, do you think?
It is. I mean, it's newer is certainly part of it. We launched the public library program in July of 2022. So it's almost 2 years old now. And then the school author talk program we just launched in September. So that was 10 months ago.
That's interesting. So in this case, like it would strike me the authors just want it for exposure, right? So do you even have to pay the author to appear?
We do. We pay an honorarium for those programs. Some of that's just because the author, we respect them and, they created something extremely valuable and we want to recognize that. We're able to reach a lot of authors through their publishers, and the publishers are very, you're in hundreds of libraries, you're in, 2,000 schools. This is a great use of the author's time if they're going to do 5 speaking events this year. This is a bigger reach than going to an independent bookstore in another city.
So how do the margins differ between the two businesses? Is it better on the author side or on the corporate side?
It is. It's better because the author talk series, there's more fixed cost. You've got the honorariums for the authors, the staff to run the program, but then it scales very nicely. For the book club business, the more book clubs we run, the more staff we need. So the profitability doesn't scale, I guess, the same way.
Exactly. So are you comfortable talking about the margins in those different businesses, or do you want to keep that under your hat?
I don't want to get too in. They're also so new. And there's, especially with schools, I will say too, Alan, we don't have any investors. We don't have any plans to like sell the company. You can see me. I realize the people who will be listening to this won't be able to. I'm 35 and I plan to be doing this for a while. So there's no rush to try to make as much money as fast as possible. It's more a long-term strategy, I guess. Especially with schools, we're very mission driven, especially in that area from we're helping kids like get excited about reading and writing and creating. And so that's really rewarding. So we're most focused on kind of engagement and getting teachers and librarians to want to use the program than like the pure, we do fine, don't get me wrong, but how can we be 5% more profitable next year is like usually like a tertiary concern.
Well, it would strike me that the margins in a business like this could be really good and you don't need to reveal them, but it is the kind of thing where you're investing quite a bit, right, to grow it. But the more you grow that reach of, at least, especially on that side of the business, as you mentioned, the more you grow the reach of that library thing, the more you amortize those fixed costs of the author and whoever's running it. And then it's all profit after that. And then you become more and more attractive to the authors the more distribution you have.
That we've definitely seen, which has been amazing, is it used to be harder for us to get some of the best authors out there potentially that we were, that patrons were always asking for. And now some of that's because we built the relationships with the publishers and literary agents and things like that. But some of it is just the reach and being able to say, this talk is going to have more than 10,000 people from all around the country engaging it. And it's going to reach, the marketing for this reaches millions of library patrons. Like that's very appealing even to some of the best-selling authors out there.
So that just feels very a good flywheel. Whereas on the corporate side, it's a good business, but it's obviously more time intensive on staff. And then selling up, there isn't that same flywheel that you get from the author side. So it would strike me as a better, the market size. So where are you, like revenue breakdown between the two? Like what percentage is which service?
Yeah, so between book club, the school author talk program, and the public library program, it's about a third, and a third right now. But that will continue. The book club as a proportion it's not growing as fast, so it'll drop. At one point, book club was 100%, so it'll continue to shrink relatively.
I love that. Like pivoting, you launch a service and then you see it and you're able to incubate it. And then you're like, all right, this is where we're going to go. I'd be curious though, like, could you do the same thing on the business side? Like create like a business book club that brings in business authors? Because man, they would die for that. And have like the same kind of model where the companies subscribe and they get the author talks and maybe they can turn some on and off.
Yeah, we're working on that right now, Alan. So that'll be available in the not too distant future.
I would, to be honest, like I was thinking about that. I was like, oh, I think I would subscribe to that. Right. And you think about these business book authors, distribution is just so crucial to them. And to be honest, like they're also looking beyond selling books. A lot of them, they want just access to companies to do other things like whatever it's consulting or coaching or whatever they're selling. Right. So like, you have a program like that, it's hugely valuable to them. So they're going to come in free, right? You're never going to have to pay them. So that's awesome. Yeah, it's a logical step. So you're already there, but that sounds like a pretty amazing. That could be like a huge flywheel.
There's a lot of competition in the space. Our company book clubs do well, but there's so many options for professional development.
But this would be unique, right? I mean, if you have the author. And then it would strike me that if you get the best authors, so going back to the library side, school side, if you get the best authors and the most distribution, you've kind of built a moat, right? It's going to be hard for someone else to come in and duplicate that service and provide any kind of value. Whereas like with the book club, that's great, but there's really not a moat there. Someone else could walk in and just do it a little bit better or like a little, So, but once you get all this distribution, you're behind the big moat in the castle. It's a beautiful place.
Yeah. So with book club, the competition is interesting because there have been other like companies that have sort of popped up, but they don't tend to last very long because there's basically it's a lot of work and you have to have enough business and build the systems out internally to make it manageable and actually retain the clients, or else you end up it becomes like a passion project. You end up running a few book clubs and never making any money.
The biggest threat to me would be other professional development providers that have access to the companies that just tack that on, right? And they're like, oh, we can build this on the side, right? So they have some distribution. But I do think that the author side creates this flywheel with defensive moat. And my guess is you'll see that grow. The other part will become real sideline over time. That's fantastic. So how did you end up getting into this in the first place?
One of my two co-founders and I worked at a civil engineering company. We're both pretty into business books. So we would read different ones, share the ones we like the best. And then we had the idea of starting a book club for like our young professionals group. And we liked running that and people seemed to like doing it. And we were getting a lot of good feedback from like our bosses and the office managers, like, this is great. Thanks so much for doing this. And we kind of realized that like, if we weren't just like booking the conference room once a month and giving ideas for like the group to pick what the next book was going to be, that no one was probably going to keep running this if we stopped it, basically. But it was creating a lot of value. So then we thought, well, this could really be a service that, people might pay for because you need someone to like spend the time to run it. And then there were many, many iterations. Like our original idea was to be like the Netflix of book clubs, where you would like send a box of books to an office and then everyone would be able to read them. And, and then you'd send it back in. And we quickly realized like no company cared about like paying $15 for employees to get like each employee to get a copy of a book. But the logistics of like shipping books back and forth and storing them and all of that was like completely overwhelming. And then the idea of making it more scalable across larger organizations was really like what didn't exist in the market at all.
And how long did it take to get it into like viable, do you think? I mean, you're starting something from scratch. That's tough.
So, we were running this book club before we officially started the company at the beginning of 2016. I'd say it probably took 2 years.
Were you working full time at that point?
The book club business was a side project for about 2 years before there was enough coming in. And then it was still like a pay cut to take it from there.
Wow. I mean, it's impressive. You built to build a new market and a service on top of it and like bootstrap it, that's a pretty impressive. I mean, I bootstrap my company, but I'm following a well-worn path and I already worked in the industry and just basically went out and did the same thing. I mean, this is like a completely new thing and it's pretty incredible.
Yeah. I mean, I will say you're hearing about the things that are still working. We've tried many, many, many different things in sort of the lifelong learning, professional development space. We don't really do anything where there's like a lot of existing services. Even if we see something where like this isn't great and we think we could do it better, we tend to say like, we're not going to go to market with something that we can't say this is new and there's nothing else like it. And that served us pretty well. Although again, when you do it that way, you definitely have probably at least 2 failures for every success is probably about the rate we're tracking.
That's why people have VC money, right? So they can waste money on these things that isn't theirs, but you guys had to bootstrap it. It's tough. It's an incredible story. And then how did you sell? Like, how did you get into these people to like, and you're selling like not a massive deal each time. So you got to get it to a lot of customers. So how did that work?
So cold email was from the beginning and still is our like most effective. That's what books the most sales appointments from day one. Well, actually, in the very beginning, we were like kind of using our personal network, party we went to college with, can we connect with your talent development person at your company and see, what might be a fit here. But, you exhaust that pretty quickly, obviously. And then that I think is part of the need of having something novel and interesting in terms of like a service for the market is that like a cold email strategy doesn't work that well if you're selling like learning management systems, right? Like every company already has one of those. So it's hard you're just going to get ignored. But if you have something interesting, people have heard of book clubs, they've heard of author talks, but they haven't necessarily heard of like a service that makes that, really accessible.
So a lot of email, and then for the libraries, is it the same kind of thing?
Yeah, email. And then, of course, conferences, we'll do webinars, info sessions, like we'll partner with state chapter of the School Library Association, for instance, and share, this is a great program, here's how it works. And then, of course, referrals once it's up and running.
Yeah, that would strike me in that market. Yeah, you get a big city in some state or region, and then everybody's like caring about it, and then they all want to do it, right?
Once you have something good, it gets easier and you've got some traction, it gets easier and easier to share it with the market.
All right. So a quick side note, what are your favorite business books that you think are like the cores that people should learn? If you have like top 2 or 3.
So great question. I've read a lot of business books. Honestly, my general answer to that is like the best business book is what you need at that stage in your business or personal growth or whatever, right? So like there are books I've read that I think are like self-published on Amazon that have been like, that have maybe sold like 20 copies and have been like, this is great. This is exactly like what I needed to read right at this moment. But that's just something that I was sort of going through. The big books I would like always recommend like generally to people are Mindset by Carol Dweck, which is all about having a growth mindset. I love the book Switch by Dan and Chip Heath, the brothers. That's all about like managing change and how to make change happen. I think if you're going to run a business, you have to understand like how to get people to change their behavior. If you want to sell them something, if you want to serve them, if you want to get them to use your product once they bought it, all of that. I love the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I think it's a great like baseline. If I had to pick just a single, if you were going to read only one business book, that would probably be a go-to. And then there's a great book called The Personal MBA, which I have a lot of our staff read. Just a really good like business primer. And I think it's very well written. And I mean, it's a long book, but it covers a lot of ground concisely. And then the other, if you're managing people, I'm a big fan of the book Radical Candor by Kim Scott. It's just got a great framework for thinking about how to manage people in a way that they're actually going to want to stay with the organization and grow with you instead of either not putting their best work in or burning out or the many other paths employees go down that isn't super sustainable.
That's awesome. Very good list. Those are some interesting ones in there. And anything that was like the most recent book you read that was like, wow, this was interesting?
I recently finished The Psychology of Money.
Oh yeah, Morgan Housel.
Yeah, which I really, another like EO member recommended. I really liked it. It's short, but I felt like people do all sorts of weird things with money and it really like the thinking behind it and it was well written, just like it helped make a lot of the world make sense to me that I didn't necessarily like understand a lot of people's behavior.
I'm trying to get all my kids to read it as they go to college because I think it's a really good grounding. Yeah, that's a great one. And my biggest one that no one ever reads that I think is really important is The Goal by Goldratt. Have you ever read that about operations?
No, I haven't.
It's kind of a painfully written book because it's like a novelized version of this guy taking over a factory and it's about to get shut down. And he learns from this guy how this thing called the theory of constraints. So it's all about where's the bottleneck in your system and then the ways that you relieve the bottleneck. So I wouldn't vouch for it on the literary canon here, but like the ideas behind it have been something that I think is really undersold. I mean, it's manufacturing based, but it really is just about like, where's the bottleneck in your company? And then finding that bottleneck is key. And then how you relieve the bottleneck and create capacity at it. And then learning the process of like, once you do that, the bottleneck shifts somewhere else. And like the ultimate goal is to have the bottleneck shift to the market. And so then all you need to do is create demand in the market and your business can respond. Anyway, the whole concept is great. I'm going to do a little piece on it here, but it's one of my favorites. But most people don't read. Anyway, it's a little diversion down the business book thing. And I love it. I keep reading them, but there are a lot of bad ones you got to get through. So then let's talk about where you're going, right? So it sounds like you're growing on the library side with these author talks. You're looking at doing that, potentially launching that on the business side. Are those really the key things to grow it going forward?
Yes. So those, and then the work with schools is big. So we just launched our elementary school program this school year. We're launching middle school this fall. So that's getting up and running. And then we're launching high school in fall of 2025. So a lot of kind of expanding that program. And then the school market is huge. And we've got a good baseline with that. Especially after COVID, there's so much learning loss, so many kids. And even before COVID, there was so many kids are just not reading as much as they used to with the proliferation of smartphones and every other distraction imaginable, right? So as a big reader, I'm very passionate about like everything we can do in terms of building out not just the author talks, but like the programming around that, supporting the teachers for getting kids excited about reading. Because so much of school is you learn and then you take a test. You learn and then you take a test. It's not like inspiring like a love of learning in a lot of cases. So trying to do as much as we can in that space. And I think there's a lot of, I don't know exactly what all of those things are yet by any means, but if we can be successful there, that's just a massive growth potential area for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it leads me to think that you have such good growth opportunities that by pursuing multiple of them, are you spreading peanut butter across the bread? And it's a tough situation, right? Because say like the business author thing, huge potential, but like the school thing has got huge potential and you're already on that. So like, how do you manage resource commitment between those two? Because really, either one is like a huge, incredibly valuable company. So how do you think through that?
There's definitely ideas that sound good that we say no to. And we've gotten better at that over the years. We used to kind of try to throw everything at the wall and see what sticks. I guess the best answer I would sort of give to that, and this may be most helpful to people listening to this, is like hiring really well. So we use like the WHO method of hiring. So that's another like fantastic book. If you've ever hired someone who didn't work out well, reading that book is very eye-opening, and we follow the process pretty meticulously. And that's been key to bringing in really great people that kind of make it possible to do a lot at once. That's one. And then I think also because our mission is all about lifelong learning in books, we're able to bring in really sharp people who like also love lifelong learning in books. If you had to pick a team member to hire and one was a big reader and one wasn't, I would hire the person who was a big reader every time. I think they're going to learn faster. They're going to be thinking more critically. So we attract very good people and that helps us. But that's a huge competitive advantage, I would say, that it's hard to, if you're a defense contractor or something, it's harder to hire for people with a growth mindset who want to take on a lot and all of that.
The only thing I would offer is it does feel like if you went all in on the one side of the business, you could accelerate its growth even faster and spend, not take any of your CPU usage of your brain and time and everything on other aspects of it. So that'd be the one thing I'd taken from business books is like focus, right? And it is an interesting case for you because you have so many good opportunities. Determining whether focus or exploring the other opportunities is where you're going to put those resources. I think it's going to determine how fast you grow going forward. And like you said, maybe you don't care about growing as fast.
You're bringing up what keeps me up at night to some extent, right? Like, are we taking on too much? Should we just focus on one thing? The one thing I keep thinking back to is like where we've been successful is when we've kind of tried multiple things and then we keep building on the things that work. We had just launched an alumni webinar series for alumni associations in October 2019. And there was some question of, well, should we launch this or should we focus on our book club business? And then of course, COVID happened, 6 months later, and that line of business really exploded. And that helped us kind of build out the model for what we do now with public libraries and schools. If you can be in more places, there is the opportunity to seize more things if you can staff it.
I want to jive on this for a minute. I'm not telling you you're doing the wrong thing or anything, but it is also the case I found that as you go, that's true. And that's what gets you through most of the starting stages of the business, right? Is your willingness to keep trying things, see what works, kill the stuff that doesn't. But there does come a point where, like in scaling, where you have to change that behavior and, you need to focus. And then, yeah, you want to try things within that focus, keep that thing. But there is like it's like what got you here won't get you there. And there's an inflection point where that happens. And I say two things. One is I 100% think that's true, but you need to know when that is. And that's a judgment call and no one really knows. And two is that is about optimizing. It's not necessarily about what is best for you or your team. It's what's best for the idea and the company. And so what I came to personally was that I love doing all these different things. Like every time I interview someone, I want to run their business too. So I want to be in that business. So I figured out for my business, I wanted to grow and optimize it. So I built a team that can kind of manage that. And then I had to get myself out of the business because I was like a destructive force for that focus. So now I do it on this podcast and other places. So just like a thing to offer the audience and you is like, there is a point at which I think focus is best for the growth of the company. And it is a different behavior that most owners don't practice. And they probably won't be happy just focusing. So it's a trade-off, right? You can do it inside your company, outside, and those are just trade-offs that you have to work through over time.
Yeah, Alan, you're giving me things to think about here. We have our quarterly goal planning meeting on Monday, so I'm got to look back through them and think, are we focusing on the right things, right? I mean, that's always the question.
Here's a cool exercise you can do that somebody did with me one time, is you take your opportunities, your current stuff, your opportunities, and you give people poker chips and you make them bet where they can get the best return and see what they do. And if everyone's spreading all their stuff across everything, you got a problem. And if they're all concentrating in one place, they're telling you the answer. So I don't know. I've run it. And I was thinking like one good thing to do is be like, let them do it. And then be like, okay, I'm going to give you your chip back. Now, tell me for real, if I had to make money off of this, if I had to grow something or I had to, whatever the answer you want, where would you really put your chips? Because mostly people are going to spread them out until you force them to make a choice. Anyway, it's an interesting exercise to go through. And I do think, I hear you talking and I'm like, man, you've got 2-3 great businesses and like maybe you can grow them all at once, but maybe if you focused on one, it would like really blow up and become something like transformational. But, that's me. I don't know. But I do think it's a worthwhile exercise to go through and to think through.
Coming back to your theory of constraints, if I could book more sales calls for our existing services, and some of it's cyclical, right? Like with the school market, you're having a lot of conversations between January and May about what schools and districts are going to do next year, and it's pretty quiet the rest of the year. If I could fully book my salespeople calls all the time, then it would give me more of a case for, okay, we need to focus on just this one thing. Yeah, like when you say theory of constraints, like we're pretty good at hiring, we're pretty good at scaling, like what we do. So it really is to some extent the market. And some things are, especially because a lot of what we're doing is so new, there is like a lot of cases we have early adopters and we're slowly, public libraries and schools they don't all jump on board with something new right away, right? You create a great service and then it takes time to like capture the market element. Maybe I'm just talking myself into being like, no, I really want to do these other things too. So we're going to try to do them.
Well, the other thing I thought just as you were talking is I'm working with somebody else. She does like these robot things that are ways you have to program them. So she sells them to schools and it's like a way for kids to like interact with stuff and they learn programming and robotics. It's cool. And it's the same sales cycle that you have, right? Same probable cost and stuff like that. A little different model because it's like a physical thing too. But there's a tech element to it. And then I was thinking like, okay, so if you really focused on, hey, we're bringing these authors and this, whatever it is that those authors bring to kids and libraries, then the company over time might actually move into other stuff because you could take a $10,000 contract, turn it into a $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 contract by offering additional services that serve the need that you're providing to those people beyond just the author talks. And that would be the way that focus would lead you in. So now you're selling $50K, not $10K.
That's a good point, right? Should we be, instead of launching something in a new vertical, should we be doing more, creating 5 new services in an existing vertical and seeing what works there, because we'll be able to support that.
Yeah. I mean, you're already selling to them. So the more you can sell, the more profitable, the easier it is. You take out your lifetime value of the customer and your customer acquisition costs, getting the better ratios and all that. So that's probably what it leads to when you think that way. We need to find a good book on focus in business. I haven't got one on this yet. So maybe you need to write it.
I don't know if you ever read Playing to Win. That's a pretty good book on like strategy. I think he was the CEO of Procter & Gamble.
Oh, I heard about that. Yeah, no, I never read that. Actually, I'll check that out.
It's about strategy, but it's good.
Well, we are kind of out of time, so I don't want to take too much more of your time. It's really fascinating. I think the business is really cool. I mean, it's hard choices, but they're great choices, right? I mean, and I'm really excited to hear about it growing because it's good stuff.
Thanks, Alan. We're very, very happy with where we are and where we, at least where we think we're going.
Yeah, exactly. Well, good luck on your strategy session next week, and we'll have you back later to hear about what the results are.
Thanks so much for having me, Alan. I appreciate it.
You've been listening to the Small Business Mentor podcast, brought to you by Alan Pence. For more insights on how to navigate your business through its black holes, visit @apence on X. Don't forget to search for Small Business Mentor in your podcast app to subscribe. Thank you for joining us, and here's to your next leap in business growth.